Hey guys, this is Sam from deep south of Orlando. Today we're back at the garage. I'm super excited. This is the day we're going to start welding the trailer and make the modifications necessary to have this chassis properly set up. So there's really no dialogue to bring anything to this video. I'm gonna go ahead and record a little voiceover. We flipped the chassis over and Sean has started to take down the few pieces of the chassis that we won't be needing. Here is trying to cut the receiver that was poorly welded on the back of the chassis. I'm also removing the leftover stabilizer jack, and then we're gonna move forward and finish cutting the front part of the trailer, which is the tongue and the A-frame, in just a second. We're using an angle grinder, and we are grinding away, cutting away as much as we can at this point. Okay, so we're gonna move toward the front and start cutting off the chopping off the A-frame and the remaining of the last cross member. Again, same method. We're using a cut disc with a diamond blade, and we're gonna go at it. The trailer was poorly assembled, but the welds were pretty substantial. They weren't actually really nice welds, but they were just they were thick. So here I'm putting a little barrier so I don't end up throwing all these debris in Sean's face as the grinder does its job. So it's sort of like shielding him from getting all the sparks and the debris flying up into his face. So we're gonna go at it for a while. It proved to be a quite significant job to remove that front part of the trailer. Okay, so now we flip the trailer back right side up, and we're attacking the welds from the top of the A-frame. We've also jacked the corner of the trailer, suspending the front part of the tongue in the A-frame, trying to leverage it. And then I'm banging on the top of that cross member with a cold chisel, trying to break the weld. It's proven to be quite difficult, but eventually we will get that separated, and then we will start to move forward and assess where we're going to be heading next. Again, that front part was quite a pain to remove. I mean, at this point we are banging on that A-frame as much as we can, trying to wiggle it loose and break the little bit that's left over of these welds, and it does not want to budge. So I guess kudos to whoever welded that part. They did a pretty good job. But finally we'll get it separated in a moment, and then we'll be able to move on to the rest. That took quite a bit of effort. I think I even broke one of Sean's hammer in the process, but we got it done anyway. So eventually we got it done. I got the big 5-pound hammer out, and I was banging as hard as I can, and finally the last weld gave up and started to the A-frame just dropped on the ground. So that was good. It took us a solid 15-20 minutes to get that front part of the trailer off, but finally we were able to get it off and get it out of the way. So after that we're going to be able to proceed and see how we're going to move forward with the rest of the chopping up. As you'll see further in the video, we'll end up having to replace the front section of the trailer as well. Okay, so now we continue to clean up. Sean has moved back to the rear receiver, which is again proven to be quite a bit of pain to remove. What's funny about that is the previous owner told me that this rear receiver was really not solid, and it wasn't meant to carry anything other than just a light bike rack. As you can see, in a little while I will try to insert a long piece of 2x2 in the receiver, trying to pry the weld loose, but it won't have any of it. So it was quite well welded onto that rear part of the chassis. Okay, so there's evidently a piece of the content that I lost, which is the part where we take a look at the front and cross member of the trailer, where the A-frame was attached, and we realized that that part is kind of all wonky, and we decide that we're not gonna keep it, and try to square off the chassis by putting a welding on a brand new piece of 2x3, which is straight. In doing so, we evidently cut the front, and here what we're trying to do with these straps is we're trying to sort of bend the frame back to square. I don't think we're going to be very successful, but we're going to try, and it would have worked probably a lot better if we had taken the leaf springs out of the equation. But what I realized afterward was that if we'd done that, then basically the leaf springs and the perches for those leaf springs might have been misaligned. And so what we're going to try to do is sort of bend the frame a little bit, make it sort of have a little bit of a give, so we can regain. I think we are off by about 1/4 of an inch at this point. And we're taking a measurement here, and we're going to take a measurement on the other side, and then we're going to tighten that ratchet strap in order to see if we can bend the frame a little bit more toward the square. Okay, so at this point it's pretty simple. You take a measurement on both sides, and you try to get as close as you can to where you have the exact same measurement. However, when you work with a frame that you didn't weld yourself, you have to work with what you have, and so that's why we keep putting that strap and trying to bend this frame back to square as much as we can, or at least get somewhat close. It's quite a bit of spring, and again, because the axle is still attached, we're not able to really move the metal. I think at this point Sean is trying to bang the metal a little bit, trying to see if that helps moving the whole frame. And we're gonna really cinch it down, but at this point we realize that we're probably going to move it only as much as we're going to be able to by doing that. I have to say that at this point in my head, I'm like, should I go get some 2x3 and just go ahead and redo the entire top portion of the chassis? Because as you can see, we're very close to having done that. However, we would have had to chop down the spring perches and had to realign everything, and so I made the decision to keep on going. And since we were only, I think, 1/8 or 1/16 out of square, I decided that it wasn't going to be that much of a big deal. And so at this point, we're making the decision that we're going to go ahead. We cut the new 2x3 section for the front, 60 inches. Okay, so before we decide to to start welding the front 2x3, we're going to put the strap one more time and really try to move it one last time to try to square it up. And you're going to be able to see that it's moving quite a bit, but because the spring perches and the axle is still in place, it ends up not moving that much. I think we at this point we still gain 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch, and we're gonna call it a day and start assembling the front part of the chassis, that 2x3 piece. So that's what we're gonna do next. Okay, so now Sean has decided that we're going to keep the strap in place and then start welding the front cross member, the 2x3, on the chassis. And the idea that by keeping it taut, we'll be able to maintain some sort of semblance of square. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep the strap like this. We're gonna lay the first bead of weld, and then we're gonna check for square again, and then we're gonna do the weld the other part of the 2x3. But that's essentially what we do, and when it's all said and done, we end up at about 1/16 off, which is more than acceptable when you think that we started with a chassis that was poorly assembled and we had to work with what we had. So in and all, a pretty good job, and we're gonna be very happy with that, and that's going to allow us to move forward. So we're going to resituate the strap. I think we're going to take another measurement here next, and then we'll keep on welding. But again, pretty happy with the result at this point. It's going to be fine. 1/16 is not a big deal, I think. It's certainly not going to be enough to wear off the tires or do something like that. And the chassis wasn't square when I brought it home, and it pulled just fine. So at this point, we're going to call it a day and then move forward with the rest of the welding. Okay, so we're taking another measurement, and we realized that something was wrong with the machine. I think the wire wasn't feeding properly. So Sean is checking out the machine, and it's going to be working pretty soon. Now we have to weld the other side of the 2x3, and that should complete the front section. That is after obviously we decided to go with a brand new piece of 2x3 as opposed to leaving what was there. I am not welding. Sean is welding. He's a much better welder than I am. Throughout this pull of beads down, but the quality of my beads are not very good. So I decided that Sean was going to be the one who was going to weld the chassis, because again, I have much better confidence in him. He has built several of these trailers. Okay, so now Sean is welding the front piece of 2x3, and I am, as you can see, I'm watching. I'm learning as much as I can from him during this whole process. All right, so we're finishing to weld this outside part of the 2x3, and again, I am watching him very carefully, because that's one thing that I wanted to do with this trailer build, was learning how to weld. I had taken some lessons, but experience means everything in welding, and so I need to learn as I go, and watch Sean carefully as he lays down the bead. So we're done welding the front piece of the 2x3, and at this point what we're going to do is make sure that that it didn't move, and so we're going to check for square again. We're going to take the tape measure in a second, and then we'll end up checking everything again. So Sean is just going to grab his tape measure and we're going to go ahead and measure again that everything is still the same. We're going to measure at the end, verify that it's still 60 inches, and then we're going to measure diagonally to see if it's moved or if it stayed the same. And I think what we're going to realize is that it is stayed within the 1/16th difference, which is good. And at this point, we're going to call that done, and we're going to move on to the to starting to weld the rest of it. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're prepping the areas where we're going to weld the cross members. So the chassis was painted black, and evidently we need to remove as much of that paint and expose the bare metal to have a good weld at that particular area. And so Sean and I are going through the marks that we've made at the areas where we're going to have those cross members, and we're all just prepping the metal at this point. So we're just grinding as much of the paint away as we can, and getting ready to position the cross members. We'll be doing with 2x2s and 1x1s, alternating 2x2 and 1x1. Okay, so now as you can see, we have put in place the 2x2s and the 1x1 cross member. And the way we figured out the placement of those is by going into the box, the cabin, the habitat, whatever you want to call it, and trying to figure out where the studs, or where the joists rather, were in the floor. The previous owner told me they were 16 to the center, but we wanted to make sure, obviously, of where they were. So we used a stud finder, and we tried to find out where the middle of each joist was. And then, because I'm going to use angle iron to create tabs to attach that box to the chassis, we are now measuring as precisely as we can where those cross member need to be in relation to the joist, but also to the tabs. So we're backing at the 2x2s and 1x1 by the exact measurement that we need, so the tabs end up being immediately underneath the joist. Those tabs will be drilled, and we will use bolts to go from the bottom to the top of the box, and from the inside I will insert some T-nuts. And so obviously we are triple checking the measurements of each of these cross members, but we're also measuring the level of the entire frame before we begin to weld, just to make sure that all the cross members are perfectly welded, and that we don't have any issues later on. So again, we're triple checking every single measurement at this point, because once it's welded it'll be too late, and we don't want to miss the joists that are inside the cabin, so the bolts go through the entire the tab, then the joist, then all the way to the T-nuts. Okay, so now we're ready to begin welding, and what you're going to see Sean do is take a piece of scrap metal and test the welder and make sure that it has the proper amperage and the proper wire feed. So he took the exact thickness of the metal that is going to be welded, and is now going to lay his first bead, making sure that everything is in order. So again, he's a much better welder than I am. He's done several of these trailers, and that really shows. He's making sure that everything is perfect. So when he has that done, he's setting up his ground clamp into the chassis, and then we're gonna go. Here I'm asking him how he's going to proceed. Is he going to do alternate one weld, tacking one, then tacking the other, then alternating? But he's telling me that he's going to do tags first, and then he's going to do a full bead on one side, then go on the other side and do the other bead, and that's how he's going to work. So that is so not all the heat end up being on one side, and deforming the metal, and so you sort of want to bounce around the chassis and go across, sort of like what you would do when you are tying the lug nuts on the wheel. You go cross pattern. It's the same thing for welding. When you have several cross members like this on the same plane, you're going to go and alternate between one and the other. Here you see Sean and I are checking the level again of the chassis before we start welding, and if we need, we would shim, and making sure that we are as close to 0 as possible, which, as it turns out, we're really close. So now Sean is going to start welding, and we're going to go ahead. He's laying 3 beads. The 2x2s are flush to the top of the channel, and the 1x1 are flush with the bottom of the channel. So what this is going to force us to do when we go ahead and put these tabs in place is the tabs that are on the 1x1 will have to be elevated to meet the plane of the top of the channel and the top of the of all the cross members. But I'll show you that in a later video probably. Alright, so as Sean continues to weld these cross members, what I am doing here is I'm actually going to drill some holes inside the receivers, and those holes are going to be so we can tag and actually weld inside from the outside of the receiver inside the spine that we are adding as part of the that's going to be the tongue of the trailer, and it's going to run from the very top forward to the very back of the trailer. And by drilling those holes, Sean will be able to lay a bead and basically fuse the receiver with the spine all at once, on top of doing a bead of weld all around. Obviously, it's a very good method of making sure that the receiver is really secure around the 2x2 spine. So I'm taking a drill press here, and I'm going to lubricate the bit, and I'm going to start drilling the holes like this, and then I'm stepping up to what's called a step bit to make the hole the proper diameter. So this is what I'm doing. I'm being very careful. It's quite a big piece of thick piece of metal, and I don't want to screw up my drill bit. So I'm applying a little pressure, making sure that I put some WD-40. Usually you would put some cutting oil, but I don't have any. So okay, so what we're going to do now is discuss the positioning of the rear receiver. I've chosen to put a rear receiver on this trailer to put my bike rack, and the end of this the receiver will be at the end of the spline, which runs the entire length of the trailer. But in order for the spline and the receiver to be aligned on the same plane as the cross member, we have to cut a little slot at the bottom of the rear cross member, and so we are deciding the depth of that slot before Sean starts to cut it. And he's going to take the grinder with the cut wheel, and he's going to go ahead and cut the slot, and then after that we're going to assemble the spline with the receiver and start to weld everything in place. So that's what he's getting ready to do now. Okay, so we've jumped ahead a little bit. The rear receiver is in place. We have not welded the spline yet, and now what we're doing is starting to clamp everything. As you can see, we've exposed the bare metal everywhere. We're going to be welding the spline to the cross member so as to prep the area. And now is going to be the time where you want to absolutely double check, triple check, quadruple check that the tongue is absolutely in the center of your trailer. And so in order to do that, you basically take a point of reference on your hub, and then you measure to the tip of your tongue, and you make sure that both of these measurements are exactly the same. So that's what Sean and I are going to do now. We're going to grab a tape measure and then go ahead and take the measurement from one side to the other. So here we go. We are grabbing the tape measure, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have the same measurement on both sides of the trailer, which will indicate that the tongue is actually positioned dead center in relation to the trailer itself. So Sean has the reference on the hub, and then I have the reference at the tip of the tongue, and we're making sure that both of these measurements are the same before we start welding. So we're getting ready to go. Sean is going to position his ground clamp, and we're going to start putting the first tacks, and then lay the first beads. Okay, so Sean is putting out the first tacks in place on the rear of the spline and the receiver, and he's going to do that at every cross member, which will secure the spline. And then what we're going to do is discuss the overall length of the tongue. And the reason why we do this is because we're going to need to calculate the angle where the A-frame meets the tip of the tongue. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that we have the correct measurement of the length, and knowing that there's going to be the additional receiver that needs to be put in place as well. And so we're going to do that in a minute. You'll see we're going to present those 2x2s and see where we're going to go. Okay, so now I'm going to present this the bottom of the A-frame, and Sean and I are going to discuss how long we're going to make these, and how many cross members are they going to cross, and how many attachment points we're going to have, so on and so forth. Obviously the main measurement here, which we're trying to decide, is how long the tongue is going to be. When I bought this trailer, the tongue was 3 feet, and it's definitely not enough because of the bumper on my Land Cruiser, on my Lexus rather. The tongue needs to be longer, or else I end up risking touching the tire when I'm turning the trailer. I have a tire carrier that protrudes from the back of the bumper, and so I need the tongue to be at least 4.5 feet. Knowing that distance, then we need to back the receiver out of that dimension, and that will give us the angle that we need to be with that side member. So that's what we're discussing, and we're getting ready to make the call. Okay, so we've decided of the length of these side pieces. We've cut the angle, and now basically what we are doing is I'm showing really quickly, Sean, the plate that I'm going to use to do the gusset, where the A-frame meets the tongue right there at the top of the trailer. I'm going to put a big gusset, and I showed him that piece of metal that I'm going to use. So now we're presenting everything together, and we're going to clamp things, as well as make sure that everything is square, level, flush, so on and so forth. And finally, we're going to mark where we need to prep the metal in order to have the metal be clean for the welds to come. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to end the video. If you've reached this point, I would like to thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with me going through this chassis. I think that this is going to conclude part 3 of the video series. The next time we meet, I will have the chassis ready and painted, so on and so forth. So stay tuned.